Well. Peak Doctor Who. Yeah, I'm not going to pretend that wasn't fantastic. I've got a lot to say and I'm very late saying it, so let's get right into my review and first thoughts on the latest Doctor Who episode, The Well. Written by Russell T Davies and Sharma Angel Wallfall, I hope I pronounced that correctly. This episode serves as Belinda's first trip into the future and as an unexpected sequel to the Series 4 fan favourite episode Midnight. I say fan favourite, or what I really mean is the Series 4 episode commonly regarded by the masses as one of the greatest episodes of television ever made. For those of you who are new to Doctor Who and are seeing this video, go watch Midnight. It's phenomenal and completely standalone. I mean, I guess not anymore, now it's got a sequel, but in the sense of an overarching series plot, it stands on its own just fine. It really is like a side quest episode. Sadly, it leaked a long time ago that this episode would be a sequel to Midnight, and that sort of split my brain in two, if that makes sense. On one hand, I'm finding out that one of my favourite ever episodes is getting a sequel. Hell yeah! On the other hand, one of the things that made Midnight so good was that we still don't really know what the monster was. The mystery behind it was so chilling. Yeah, I was fearful that any continuation of that would ruin the allure of the original. I'll get into my thoughts on that in a minute, but for now I also just want to say that the fact it leaked also has me in two minds in another way. The reveal about halfway through that this was the Midnight entity was such a cool moment, and on one hand I wish I got to experience that as a complete surprise, but on the other hand I was able to view this episode in a non-biased way, without the thrill of a surprise reveal to influence my opinions, and I can say with certainty that this episode still bangs. I do wish I'd seen the reveal blind, but I'm happy I can sit here now and say that this episode will stand the test of time and is not just hinging on an exciting reveal. But the episode itself, how was it? Man, where do I even start? This thing is a slow burner, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It starts like I assume every episode will start this year. In the TARDIS, exactly where the last one left off, in the same clothes even, in an attempt to return to Earth in 2025. I like this, it's like Flux. One big, more connected story, but with large side quests along the way. It makes the mission to get Belinda back to Earth feel more real and important. I can totally see this paying off brilliantly in the finale, more than the Susan Twist stuff did last year, for example. The pair of time-travelling teammates end up landing on the planet that is not Earth. Nope. The pair of time-travelling teammates end up landing on a planet that is not Earth and in a year that couldn't really be further from 2025. You know, I'm beginning to think this Vindicator isn't working very well. Well, okay, I mean, I say it isn't working. I think it is working, but that's because my current theory is that Mrs. Flood has tampered with the Vindicator and is causing more problems than it is solving. At the very least, this Vindicator is either telling her where the Doctor has landed, or she's using the Vindicator in some way, you know, she can hack it, to dictate where the Doctor lands. So far, she's sent him to meet a god and to encounter the scariest entity he's ever met in his life. You know, I can see this being her doing. But we'll see. Anyway, they land on this planet and for the next 20 minutes there's a very slow build-up to the big reveal. This build-up works so well in my opinion. It's a classic way of showing the audience the kind of danger the characters are in without directly showing chaos. A trick used very often for smaller budget outings. Something Russell T Davies will have been used to when writing Doctor Who in 2005. Showing dead bodies, describing how they died, often in such gruesome ways that they wouldn't even want to show that in Doctor Who anyway. This built up such a scary image, you know, was it a big monster? Why did they all go mad? Whatever it is, how did they survive on this planet? Plenty of questions were raised, and all of them hinted towards an infinitely dangerous enemy. Maybe I'm biased because of this, but I do love that kind of setup. When the time comes to actually see the enemy, encounter them, you know, I'm ready, I'm primed, I'm excited. I don't know, this felt very much like the Doctor Who of the past, while not straying too far from what we know now. Really, this episode, and the last two, have felt exactly how I'd have expected Russell T Davies written Who to be at this time, unlike the last series, which unfortunately just did not feel like Doctor Who in the slightest. Brilliantly, this episode splits up Belinda and the Doctor for a good chunk, and I love this. If you've seen my last two videos, this won't be a surprise to you, but I love Belinda, she's such a great companion, and getting to see her on her own, especially this early on in her travels, man, it was great. She's heroic still, but scared shitless. Basically what I'm saying is, up to the big reveal, this episode is paced wonderfully. But the one big thing I've neglected to mention up to this point is the deaf character Alice Fenley. Absolutely insane. This episode was never even meant to feature a deaf character, but after the casting director suggested Rose Ayling-Ellis, they reworked the script to accommodate her. Now that is how you do it. I have no issues with the story being written about an important topic like this, and I'd argue it's vital that some stories like this are told as soon as possible. But man, casting an actor based on merit and then accommodating her in the script afterwards, that's inclusion, that's how it should be done. This is why I love Doctor Who. I cannot express enough how much I love the fact that this episode was adapted after casting her, rather than being about a deaf character at inception. Again, I love when an important story is being told from the start, but something about this kind of inclusion and adaptation just makes me so happy. Anyway, this episode handles Alice so incredibly well. I am not deaf, so I can't really talk with any experience on all of this, but some moments really stood out to me as mature, well-considered inclusions. Obviously, the live subtitles on each character was a great, sci-fi wonderful idea, but the paranoia that other characters felt during silent sign language interactions was so brilliant. That felt real. Even the Doctor, someone who cares and is intelligent enough to adapt his behaviour for other people's needs without ever needing to be asked, even he assumed she couldn't lip read, and he tried to pull the wool over her eyes. These kind of assumptions and different treatments felt really well considered and added such a brilliant and mature level of depth to the whole episode. Apparently this episode's script even got a glowing report back for British Sign Language compliance in terms of the characters' behaviours, which doesn't surprise me at all. Also, all the cast learnt sign language so they could perform genuine interactions. I love that so much. Man, I could gush about this aspect of the episode forever, probably, but alas, there is more to cover, and I'm sure you've heard all of this before anyway. Once the Doctor clocks that this planet was in fact midnight, the episode became something else. It suddenly became a lot scarier. The mini flashbacks to the episode from 2008 were a nice addition, but frankly, I don't know if it was needed. How many times has a returning monster shown up in Doctor Who and the Doctor has made reference to fighting them before? You know, it's pretty normal, and I don't think for new viewers this was needed. Old viewers should be able to remember this one. I guess the reveal of the planet being called Midnight might have been a bit out of place for new viewers if they weren't given the context of this being a callback, but even then I don't know. Sometimes it does just feel they want to put David Tennant's face in everywhere they can. I mean, kind of don't blame them, but also, please move on. Given that the entity behaves differently to before anyway, I just don't think the flashback was needed. It's a small nitpick and I don't really care. I mean, it was 3 seconds, I'll move on, but still. The entity being visible behind Alice for a split second was cool. Albeit maybe a tad worrying. A shadowy black figure. If we had to see the entity, I'm glad it was like this, you know? You could reasonably say that this wasn't even the entity itself, rather it was just an effect given to the person currently possessed. Hell, you could interpret it any way, to be honest. It made for a fun jump scare and a set of tense moments, while furthering the feeling of uncertainty and lack of trust each character had for Alice and Belinda. Good fun. The entity then killing anyone that was behind it was a really fun and creative way of playing around with this kind of magic. This episode was so well shot as well, I loved it. The kills themselves were pretty gritty for Doctor Who. It wasn't obvious, but there were clear times when a character's bones were snapping. Very, very dark. I love the idea that the entity is just having fun killing. However, this time I think it was a little more than that. When the Doctor speaks to Alice and hears the whispering, fantastic moment by the way, incredible acting from Shutigawa, his face changes slightly and he says something along the lines of, "Ooh, there it is." I haven't rewatched the episode, I'm sure the words were different, but it was, similar enough. This line is very similar to something the entity said in Midnight, and I took this to mean that the Doctor had very briefly been possessed, and this was the entity realising that the Mercury Wall was its way out, not the Doctor realising a way to defeat it. Well, maybe it was both at the same time. The entity wanted to escape the planet and wreak havoc all over, and this was its chance. I love that. Suddenly we now start to see the motives of this mysterious monster. The whole segment of the guy with the attitude overthrowing the woman with the attitude was great because you just know he's gonna die and you know it's gonna feel good when he does. I was surprised at the body count in this episode though. Again, this is Doctor Who. However, with a cast that big and, the Midnight entity, it's inevitable. The next thing that happens is really my only issue with the episode. After they escape and run away from the main room, the Doctor stops to see the entity himself. And that's fine. I just wish we never saw it. Seeing nothing but horror and fear on the Doctor's face would have been infinitely more scary and effective than any real visual for us would have been. Seeing an almost dog-like creature in the shadows? Yeah, that was exactly what I wanted to avoid. Part of what made the Midnight entity so scary was that we would never know what it truly looked like. I think the idea of only one person ever seeing that, and that being the Doctor, is cool, but us seeing that, it was a bad move. I get that it was subtle and mostly hidden and very little more than a shadow, but still, I wish we never did. I don't think this was enough to ruin Midnight though, I just wish it didn't happen. As a whole, this sequel didn't do all of the things I was scared of, so I'm still very happy. I think had they just done the same copying and talking and saying the same words and then catching up thing they did in Midnight, that would have been a bit disappointing, so I am really glad that the entity itself is doing something else. Their gimmick is different this time. I think that was important and they made the right move there. As they get to the escape pods or lifts or whatever it was, something awesome happened. 3 people got in the lift, but the lift identified 4. Insane twist. because just after that happens, it becomes clear that the entity is still in the room with the Doctor, Belinda, and the other 2 crew members. That tense moment of them working out who is possessed was so good, because the whole time, assuming you picked up on the subtle visual detail of the lift, there's the underlying knowledge that it is no longer the entity, rather it is just one of the entities. Batshit twist that I did not see coming at all, and I loved it. A second entity leaving the ship, it's so cool, and it adds so much more mystery to an episode that could otherwise have been seen as a mystery-ruining move. Where it gives us more info on the entity, this episode also manages to throw curveballs and asks more questions that'll hopefully never get answered. Is it just 2? Are there hundreds of these things? Who knows, and that's wonderful. I know online there's some discussion about whether there actually are 2 or if it was 1 all along and it was just tricking them. Quite frankly, I wholeheartedly disagree. There are definitely 2, at least. And this is not me, failing to read the subtleties of the episode or something. No, there were definitely, it makes so much sense that there were 2. It's such a better narrative as well that there were 2. Hell, you could even say that when the Mercury Wall thing happened, it split off and became more than 1. You know all this stuff about smashing the mirrors so that the entity is never behind itself? What if, kind of like the image of an angel becoming an angel, what if the Midnight entity, having a reflection, duplicates it? What if they end up killing each other? What if the Midnight entity didn't want there to be a second Midnight entity? And that's why the mirrors were all smashed, and that's kind of what happened when the Mercury Wall became a thing. I don't know. All I'm saying is, I wholeheartedly disagree with the idea that there's only 1. There's definitely more than 1. There was one of them fell down the well, and one of them went in the lift. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, yes, jumping back down the well with the entity was a great way of winning. At the end of the day, this thing can't be killed. The only way of defeating it, in quotation marks, is by trapping it through self-sacrifice. I think that's why this enemy is quite so scary to the Doctor. He knows there's no safe way to win, and that's almost never the case for him. Once again, episode 3 of a modern Doctor Who season features a companion getting shot and surviving due to futuristic medicine. Very original. I'm not going to say it again, but this series is taking exactly the same format as the last series. This episode ends with the reveal of the second entity being on the ship and one of the crew members being possessed by it, or at least being attached to the back of said crew member. Ending on that kind of reveal is bold. It's not often that Doctor Who opts for that kind of bad ending. I say bad as in like, oh no, this is not good for the characters. It was a fantastic ending in terms of, TV quality. But I'm so glad it did end like that. You cannot and will not win against this creature, and I love that they never ever try to suggest there's a chance to win. It's brilliant. It's so sadistic in a way. Of course, this episode features Mrs. Flood again in a very Susan Twist style sense. She's now just cropping up in various places, seemingly already established like she already has a life there. We could read into this in a million different ways. Right now, it's just too early to be sure. However, I do wish she'd do something evil sometime soon, because it's gonna wear pretty thin. I mean, it already kinda has. I've said this before, but they should not have teased anything to do with her until the end of Season 1. Her being a mystery since Christmas Day 2023 has meant that by now nobody really cares anymore, especially because she's not done anything worth caring about other than just showing up and looking at the camera. It's a shame. Her moment in this episode was pretty cool though. I like that she's following him around and watching him. I'm still intrigued to see where it goes, even if the leaks are true and I already know where it's going. I want to see it play out. I mean, I'm still a Doctor Who fan at the end of the day. Anyway, I think that's it. I was very late getting to watch this episode, hence my review being, almost a week late. But that's the way the cookie crumbles, and I've eaten a lot of cookies this week, so they've crumbled a lot. I have a lot of thoughts about this episode, and I'm sure more will come in time as well, especially on a rewatch, which I will definitely be doing in the future, because I'm giving this episode a strong 9. Bloody brilliant. And my only real issue is that we saw the entity. Otherwise, it's perfectly paced, scary, tense, so well written. Loved every second. This series, so far, is one of the best ever in my opinion. Obviously, it could still go horrendously, but, we'll see. It's crazy that these words are coming out of my mouth, but I can't name a series whose first 3 episodes are all consistently this good. My favourites, Series 3 and 5, both have duds in the first 3. The Shakespeare Code and Victory of the Daleks for the record. And while Gridlock and the 11th Hour both top anything we've had in the new series so far, there's no denying that the consistency of this 9 out of 10 excellence is a great sign of things to come. I'm a very happy Doctor Who fan right now, and I cannot wait for more. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments. I really want to know what everyone thought. I'll be back at it with a review of Lucky Day sometime next week, hopefully earlier than Friday, so stay tuned for that. But until then, stay wibbly, stay wobbly, stay timey-wimey, and I will see you in the next one.